It's 2022, so it is time for another trend prediction video. Like always, the trends that I'm showing you here are observed not only in graphic design, but also in illustration, web and UX design, movies, TV shows, commercials, and even computer games. Now, even though some of these trends have started a while ago, they are expected to be peaking or reaching a broader audience or just simply gaining momentum in 2022. As I always say, every graphic designer and creative professionals in general should always be aware of visual trends, but of course that doesn't mean that they have to follow them blindly. So consider the examples that I'm going to show you in this video more as a source of inspiration, or as a little creative exercise. You can also experiment with these trends and see how you can fuse them with your own personal style. And one final thing before we get started, the examples I'm showing here are all on a Milanote board, and for that the link is in the description below. So feel free to check it out and explore all the examples in your own time. First up, we have to talk about this amazing style of combining and mixing 2D and 3D art. We can see this popping up pretty much everywhere, but probably the best example has to be the Netflix series Arcane League of Legends, which I can highly recommend to anyone, even if you don't know anything about the game that it is based on. Most importantly, it is worth a watch, mainly because of its breathtaking visual style. So essentially, the creators are combining the traditional illustration and animation style with the 3D animations and renders. To quote the director of animation for the show, the backgrounds are digitally hand-painted and the texture on the characters is crafted to get the graphical look that fits with the environment. We also mainly use 2D animation for the effects like explosion, tears, smoke to reinforce the painted look. When you look at frames from the show like this one, it is really hard to tell whether you are looking at a concept art, an illustration, or actually something that is a 3D animation. Again, this style is not completely new, and we've seen something quite similar used in the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movie. But somehow the creators of Arcane, in my opinion, managed to go even beyond what we've seen in Spider-Verse and achieved an even more unique and stunning blend of 2D and 3D art. And the mixture of 2D and 3D elements or assets is also noticeable across all kinds of graphic design and illustration projects. So when you take a closer look at these couple of cool examples that I collected here, what you might notice that is common amongst most of them is that even though there are 3D elements used in these compositions, the actual viewing angle is very two-dimensional or flat. So we are either looking at things from above or from the side. And in some extreme examples like this one, there is hardly any noticeable perspective in the composition. And it is quite controversial because the whole point of creating a 3D render or animation is that we can walk around and turn things around in 3D space. While here there is this intentional restraint introduced, which makes things more unique and interesting, that we are keeping the camera on this very flat two-dimensional angle. Even in motion examples like this one, where we have that 3D object turning around, there's a certain point when it turns completely green and it turns to its side, so it becomes completely flat. The constant switching back and forth between the 2D and 3D view of the same object and the combination of all of those two-dimensional shapes in the background, what makes this really fresh and unique. In these examples, another cool thing that was introduced to the 3D renders is grain or texture. That again is something that we mainly see in 2D illustrations. And we can see the same thing here. Once again, the grain that is used for shading the 2D illustrations is incorporated into the 3D model versions. And the similar aesthetic can also be found in computer games like Bad North, which is an awesome minimalist strategy game where you are fighting off Vikings trying to pillage islands. And even though the game is completely three-dimensional, so you can turn the island around while playing, it still has the aesthetic of an isometric illustration. Another good indicator that the 2D, 3D mixing is becoming more popular is that Procreate now allows you to import 3D models directly into your compositions and paint directly on them or around them. And in case you are a 2D artist and wondering how to get into creating 3D models and animations, I would highly recommend to check out Blender, which is a completely free but highly professional tool. And just recently, with the introduction of version 3, it also got much easier to use and also has a lot of new features to explore. Let me know in the comment section below if you would like to see us making some tutorials on how to get started with Blender, or how to recreate this combination of 2D and 3D style with tools like Procreate. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, you must have heard of NFTs and crypto art. And even though this is not a visual trend, it's definitely a movement that you should be familiar with, because it has a huge influence on the type of art that's being produced by lots of artists around the world. And that also includes graphic designers and illustrators. So the best way I can describe what makes NFTs really unique is that it's a combination of trading cards or other collectibles, the stock market, cryptocurrency, and digital art. And even if you're still skeptical about the worth of NFTs, you have to admit that it really revolutionized the way we think of the value of a digital art piece. For someone who is passionate about creating digital paintings and illustrations, this is definitely something that sounds amazing. However, just like in contemporary art, not always the most aesthetically pleasing artwork is going to have the highest value. So just as an example, this simple illustration of an ape is currently on auction for $265,000. And that is actually the amount most likely this will be sold for within a couple of hours, if not for more. But in case you're wondering, this is still far from the most amount of money spent on a single NFT. So currently the record holder is this piece by Beeple, The First 5,000 Days, which was sold in March 2021 for $69 million. And without going into the technicalities of NFTs, there's one thing that's very important to mention, which is a huge benefit for creators, is that if they are the one who are turning their work into NFTs, or otherwise called minting it as NFTs, they will always be able to prove that they are the original creators. And also, besides the money that they make on the initial sale, after every consecutive sale, they will still be getting royalties. So in a way, it is slightly similar how you would sell your illustrations or designs on a stock site, where again, multiple people will be able to buy it and you will always get some royalties from it. But while with the stock asset, there is always the middleman or aggregator, which is the stock site itself, who is going to make more money on the work that you are selling than yourself. The real benefit of minting and selling your own NFTs is that there is no middleman to speak of. And in case you are still new to the NFT world, I highly recommend to check out this article, which you can find on the board, by Scott Belsky, the Chief Product Officer at Adobe, and also the founder and creator of Behance, the largest online creative community. And by the way, if you have a Behance portfolio, now there is a separate section for officially listing the NFTs that you created yourself. This is a great way to promote your NFTs and get some additional exposure on them. And it is just a further proof that NFTs are here to stay and they are not going to die out anytime soon, like some people predicted. Art Deco started originally as a movement in the 1920s and 30s, but it is still highly popular as a visual style, and it influences a lot of things from movies to interior design, architecture, and of course graphic design. The aesthetics of Art Deco is very similar to another style coming just before it called Art Nouveau, with the main difference that instead of focusing on natural motifs and decorative elements, it is emphasizing more the industry and machines, and that is why there are more geometric shapes compared to Art Nouveau's organic decorations. But the reason I like to call this trend Part Deco is because it's not entirely the same as the original Art Deco. It's more like a fusion again of Art Nouveau, Art Deco, and maybe a couple of other things. The most important ingredients for this style has to be the combination of symmetry and line art. And the sophisticated thin lines, often using gold, can even be found in the title sequence of Foundation, the Apple TV series based on the series of books by Isaac Asimov. Another important aspect of the style is the restraint on the colors used. So we normally would have a quite limited color palette of maybe just 2 or 3 colors. But the great sense of unity in most of these compositions not only comes from that limited color palette, but also the fact that usually all the line art or decorations are using the same line weight, and sometimes even a restriction on certain angles within which the lines are drawn. Don't forget to like this video and comment about what's your opinion on these trends. And also make sure to subscribe to this channel if you don't want to miss upcoming videos exploring these visual styles in more depth and tutorials on how to recreate them. Almost as a direct opposite to the beautiful and sophisticated Art Deco, we have another visual trend that has been gaining momentum, which is probably best called anti-design, but it is also reminiscent of other art styles like brutalism and dadaism. Common theme for this trend or the styles that came before it is that it is intentionally going against those well-established graphic design principles and rules that we would normally want to follow. Now, if you are not familiar with these, I highly recommend to check out my graphic design theory series here on the channel. The link is in the description below. But coming back to the anti-design trend, the main question is, why would someone deliberately try to make their design look bad, or unfinished, or difficult to use? And I can think of 3 reasons: humor, attention, and freshness. Graphic design is about visual communication, and your task as a graphic designer is to make sure that the message is clear and people can very quickly get the information that they need. Now, this is something that anti-design goes completely against, and instead of making things easy to comprehend, here the viewers are really challenged to be able to understand what they are looking at and to decipher the information that they are presented with. Now, there's actually one benefit that I can think of when it comes to anti-design, and that's the fact that besides annoying the viewers, they will actually be spending more time looking at these work compared to designs that are very clear and easy to comprehend. Another interesting reason why I believe this style is gaining momentum is mainly because people are just generally fed up with a lot of things. Using this style is a great way for graphic designers to relieve some stress and really do the things that they normally would avoid, like mixing, merging, distorting typefaces, using clashing colors, overusing repetition, and creating unbalanced compositions. But it is actually something that also viewers will be able to emotionally connect to, because they also have a lot of stress and frustration. And when they see something that is clearly bad and going against conventions, it will get their attention, which is extremely hard to do these days. So I'm not saying that you should be following anti-design, and it's something that I personally wouldn't use in my own work, but just like all the other trends, it's definitely something worth talking about and being aware of. One of my favorite recent examples was how Spotify displayed the top genres that I was listening to in 2021. And yes, these are the top musical genres that I'm listening to, but more importantly, it's just crazy how bad the typography looks. But if you think about it, it is so bad that it has to be intentional. And that's one important thing, that if you are trying to do anti-design or something similar to this style, then you have to make sure that it looks intentional and not just a minor mistake. So be bold and unapologetic, going against all the rules that you can think of that you would normally apply to your work. And even though a lot of people would consider these compositions ugly and hideous, I would actually argue that if something is extremely bad, it can actually start to look good. Another interesting visual trend is the use of achromatic color palettes or monochromatic color palettes. And what essentially that means is to do things in black and white, or with the use of a single color in different tones. And besides examples in graphic design and illustration, this trend can really be observed in recent movies, like the couple of examples you can see here on this board. And even though not using colors and doing everything in black and white might sound like a huge restraint, it can actually have a lot of benefits. And one of the most important things is that it can make things feel timeless. While in certain cases it is used clearly to represent a specific era, like the Oscar-winning movie The Artist, which was connecting us to the era of silent movies, it can also be used to create a special aesthetic or mood, like with the special edition versions of Zack Snyder's Justice League and the Mad Max Fury Road Black and Chrome edition. But the most important advantage or benefit of this limitation of working in black and white or grayscale is that you mainly will have to rely on contrast, or the contrast can take center stage in your compositions. There is a reason why most digital artists and also logo designers would start doing everything first in black and white, so they can really focus on the tonal variations in their work or the silhouettes of the shapes that they are working with, and establish depth, hierarchy, contrast before moving on introducing the colors they eventually want to work with. But don't get me wrong, like I said before, I'm not telling you to start doing everything in black and white from now on. This is just another trend that's worth noticing, but like with every restraint that you can use in your work, this can be another great exercise to appreciate the importance of tonal values and contrast, and how you should be prioritizing these before choosing your color palette. Exactly how Art Deco and anti-designs were complete opposites of each other, the maximalism trend is a complete opposite of the achromatic design that we just discussed. This style can also be referred to as anti-minimalistic, or the way I like to call it, it's visual overload. It's about being bold and colorful, and instead of relying on the well-known less is more principle, here it's about more is more. This is again something that's trending not only in graphic design and illustration, but also in areas like interior design. And the main difference here compared to anti-design is that even though there is a lot of things going on in most of these compositions, there is still a pleasing unity that holds everything together. And it's actually a really hard thing to do when you have to work with so many different colors, shapes, and forms. And I have huge respect for the artists who can do this well, not only because they have to spend a lot of time on each artwork, but also because I know just how hard it can be to make these complex compositions work. And don't be fooled, even though we are seeing a lot of bold and saturated colors, in most cases there is still an underlying color palette, and most of the time it is a tetradic color harmony. Again, in case you're not familiar with this, in the design theory series I go into detail on the different color harmonies and also a lot of other things that you need to know about working with color. And last but not least, I would like to remind you that most of the time these trends appear not in isolation, but often blending and mixing into each other. Instead of thinking of them independently, try to think of ways that you can combine certain aspects of them and come up with something unique that potentially can be the start of a new visual trend. Thanks a lot for watching. Like and share this video if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified whenever we release new videos. Click on the link on my right and start your membership today to get access to over 200 hours of training courses and personal mentoring by me and my team of creative professionals. Have fun learning, guys, and I will see you in the next one.